Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Games. My name is Ben and I am joined with the one and only Wes for a very special episode today. How you doing, Wes?
I am doing great. How about you, Ben?
I'm like super hyped. I don't know. This is just a very special episode to me. It's probably the episode I've been looking towards all year. I just cannot wait to get into these games today.
Yeah. So just a brief mention of it. We got Atari 2600 coming up. It's going to be our special topic. It's going to be everything that we cover in the timeline today because it's a huge part in video game history and there's a lot of fun stuff to look at.
That's right. Let's get into that a little bit later, though. Let's start by talking about what we've been playing, Wes. I'll start out because I really haven't been doing anything. Haven't had too much time. I've been playing WoW a little bit, but there's really nothing exciting happening. I'm just questing.
No news to report there.
No, I wish I could say I gotten like a new mount or something cool, but no.
Unfortunately, well then I can take it away, I guess, with what I've been playing recently because I've been playing a lot of games.
Okay.
Most recently, I was getting back into Darkest Dungeon, like I promised myself I would, and said, dang it, I beat Hollow Knight, I gotta beat Darkest Dungeon. Played that for a decent bit and was having some fun with it, and then I just kind of stopped playing it again. But it's no fault of the game. I got distracted because a friend of mine I play Monster Hunter with a lot, or at least I did in the past, started playing it again. I got super hype about the Monster Hunter World grind again. So I've been doing that a lot, like a lot. It's been causing weird random crashes on my PC, which is not great. But other than that, it's been a good experience. It's incredible. I mean, I didn't play any Monster Hunter games before Monster Hunter World on the PC.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have an idea of how. I knew that they were like, part of the point was that it's this incredibly dense game. Like, you got to learn all about how to fight certain types of monsters and all these items, and you have to change what you bring into every single hunt and customize it, or else you're not going to succeed, and like tons of crazy stuff. And this is apparently less in that aspect, but man, just going back into it after not playing it for several months, it was crazy how much I had to relearn, which is exciting, but also a pain. It's like a little bit of a barrier to entry. If I just want to like pick it up and play again, I got to remember all the big monsters attack patterns and stuff like that, and what equipment's good and what I'm even grinding for. But it's good. There's still tons of grind left. I haven't got the new expansion for it, which at this point is probably far from being new. I think it came out like 6 months ago, if not longer. But me and my friend both felt like we still have so much left to do in the base game. It's no point to buy it just yet. So it's been good, but as of recently, it's making me question how much grind in a game I can handle before just dropping it completely. As
Right.
you know, with WoW as well.
Yep.
It's just like for the end game stuff, or at least end game for the base game that I'm playing, the drop rate of like this one item that you need is so small, and it happens with tons of singular items that you need, but like all for separate things. I'm at this point now where it's like I could get like 5 weapons that I really want to get, but I'm missing one item from all of them, basically. And I have to grind different monsters to get every single item.
The WoW like connections are really apparent here, Wes.
Yeah. I know, I didn't think about that at first, but it really is. I mean, it's just like the gameplay's good, and that's, kind of what makes a grind fun, something that incentivizes you to keep doing the gameplay that you already enjoy. But it's getting to the point where I'm hitting a bit of a wall.
Yeah.
We'll see. Because then I get one item, I get life steal on an axe, which just seems awesome because I can just spam and then not dodge and just be like a tank. But yeah, it's been a little rough overall. Super happy to get back into it, and I might end up buying Iceborne, the expansion, anyway, just because it adds a lot of what I constantly have fun with, which is learning new monster attack patterns and just like the awe of all these crazy monsters that they put into the game.
Each one's like a boss fight, right?
Basically, yeah.
How many are there? It's just like roughly. Do you know?
I should look up the exact number, but I want to say base game, there's probably like 30, 35 different ones, and
Okay.
maybe like 45 if you count different variants that are pretty much the same, but a lot of times they have like different moves and they attack more often, stuff like that if they're a more difficult variant.
Hmm.
And then each one of those also just has harder versions for when you get better gear, but those usually don't have different attack patterns. It's like a different kind of difficulty increase.
Okay.
But as far as like unique monsters, I want to say it's like 30 or 35.
Okay.
It's
That's
pretty
a good
good.
amount.
Yeah. And there's a lot of new ones in the expansion too. There's also a lot of like this monster looks slightly different and now does a different element damage or something like that. But I still think that's pretty cool. They usually do a decent job with it.
Okay.
Though there is a lot of possibility for it to feel like, oh, this is just like a reskinned whatever, Kushala Daora, or, throw out some of the weird names that they all have.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I'm glad it's going well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. As long as I get one of those items soon, I'll be like, oh, the grind was totally worth it. Time to do a little bit
Yeah.
more. As long as it's within a reasonable
Yeah,
time
that's the
frame.
thing. That's the thing with those games. It's like I was running something this past weekend, and I ran it like I needed two items from this one dungeon. I ran it like I probably 8 or 9 times, and I was like, okay, I only have time for one more run. This is the last run, and they both dropped on that run. And I was like, oh my god,
It
it felt so
knows.
cool, but
Yeah.
it's like, man, if it didn't drop though, I was gonna be angry.
I mean, that's the classic, like, I can stop whenever I want trope, right? The
Right,
game, the game's like, yeah, hey, I swear, if it didn't drop that time, I would have stopped playing, but you
right,
probably wouldn't have. There's a scary fine line there.
yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to recently. A lot of Monster Hunter. Did you want to start our special topic for the day?
Yeah, well, I feel like you should start because you're going to talk about the history behind the 2600 first, but then I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardware, and then we're going to get into the games. So after you, Wes.
All right. Well, I just wanted to do a little transition anyway, so that was beautiful, Ben. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to start off talking about sort of the development and the hardware behind the Atari 2600. Because as you'll be able to tell, as soon as we start talking about all these games, it's kind of crazy how much ahead this is from all the other second generation consoles that we've talked about, being the Fairchild and the RCA Studio 2. So early on in 1974, Nolan Bushnell started to think about the fact that single game discrete logic systems weren't really profitable. A lot of times they had high development time and high development cost, but then they would only be relevant and selling on the shelves for like 3 months. So if
That
you
makes
didn't,
sense.
yeah, yeah, because people get tired of it and nobody else wants to buy it. So it makes a lot of sense looking back at it. At the time, it was probably the way to make consoles, so people kept doing it. But it was a real bit risky business idea, I guess. And you had to really get one that sold really well to make much of a profit at all on it. So back in 1974, Atari acquired a company called Cyan Engineering and started the Grass Valley Think Tank, which was just sort of an informal Atari think tank in, I'm guessing, Grass Valley, California, where designers and engineers would kind of think up new arcade games. And eventually they decided that they wanted that team to start thinking about how to make a multi game console. And so, after determining that multi game consoles would require a microprocessor, and at the time realizing that microprocessors were incredibly expensive, $100 to $300 at the time, which would probably be something around like $700 today, Steve Mayer and Ron Milner from Cyan Engineering met with Chuck Peddle, who just came out with the new MOS Technology 6502 processor, which was much cheaper than the competition from Motorola, and they worked out a deal so that they were getting it for a really good price. So then in December of 1975, Joe DeCoeur was hired to help design the first prototype for what would become the Atari 2600, which was codenamed Stella, apparently after his bicycle. I don't know if that was the brand or he named his bicycle, but that was the first prototype name. And then by March of 1976, a second prototype was completed. Somebody named Jay Milner had worked on it and was able to fit a television interface adapter called a TIA, which is basically what was needed to help a console communicate with a TV to transmit audio and video. And he was able to find a way to fit all of that onto one chip, which helped kind of keep everything small and compact in this prototype. And the 1976 prototype also had the 6507 MOS processor, which would end up being in the full release version of it as well, and a ROM cartridge slot for ROM games, meaning that this was definitely a second generation console and it could play multiple games like Bushnell was hoping for. So, as the development of the console were ongoing, the team was moved by Atari from where they were currently based to Sunnyvale, California, to the Atari headquarters. And Steve Mayer, who previously worked for Cyan Engineering and now worked for Atari, headed up the project. They were really hoping to get it out before everyone else. Nolan Bushnell apparently kind of bullied a bunch of the people who were selling them chips and said, "Hey, don't sell these to anyone else so nobody copies us," which is a classic early Atari move, I feel like. But basically, the Fairchild beat them to the punch in November of 1976 and released it first. So Atari was kind of panicking, and they were like, "Hey, we got to get this out really soon if we want to make the same impact with this same sort of console, basically." So they wanted to fast track the prototype and get it to release, but they didn't have the money for it. Nolan Bushnell was thinking about making Atari public, but then decided to sell the company to Warner Communications for $28 million, which I believe is in 1977 value, which is like a lot
That's
of
pretty
money.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And because of that, they were able to kind of focus a lot more money into developing this console, which would then release as the Atari Video Computer System, or VCS, which we've been calling and will continue to call the Atari 2600 because it was renamed that after the release of Atari's next console in 1982. And so because of the selling the company to Warner, they were able to get this product out by September of 1977. It was originally priced at $199, which is $846 today. Sounds like a lot, but I think it's kind of on par with some of the other second generation consoles we've been seeing. And that came with the console, 2 joysticks, and the cartridge for combat. And through the end of 1977, it ended up selling 350,000 to 400,000 consoles. So I think it did pretty well in the last couple months of that year.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty much all I had for the development of it. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about the hardware behind it, Ben?
Yes, I did. Some of this stuff gets like pretty jargony.
Right.
But there's a couple like notable things that I did find that I thought were super interesting. There was a part inside the console that like ran the video and audio processing power stuff, and that was called the television interface adapter, which was actually a custom component made by Atari. So I thought that was interesting. You got this like custom computer chip in addition to the MOSTech chip, and that custom one was purely Atari's design, which I thought was interesting. But I have a couple things here that I really tried to figure out and compare between all of the second gen consoles that we've talked about, being again now the Atari 2600, the Fairchild Channel F, and the RCA Studio 2. First thing, I wanted to look at the sound because, as I think we're going to talk about later, the sound in this console is pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't really know what a sound channel is. I don't know. Like, there's a bunch of like weird jargony stuff when you get into this. The thing I do know for sure is that the 2600 had 2 sound channels, so 2 sounds could be playing at any one time. So that's cool, I thought. I'm not quite sure if the Fairchild or the RCA Studio 2 had 2 channels or just 1, but it's good to know that this one has 2. And then the other thing, I wanted to figure out like how the refresh rate worked with this, because the RCA Studio 2 is so bad in comparison. But it really seems like it's probably a combination of factors, such as like how much data is on the cartridge itself, and like how much RAM is in the consoles, what the CPU is, like just tons of different things. So I didn't get like a single like this is why it's better answer. But the 2 things I was able to figure out was the amount of colors and the resolution. So as you know, the RCA Studio 2 was in black and white, so that kind of sucked. The Fairchild is in color, but Wes, do you know how many colors there are on the Fairchild?
Ooh, I want to say 8?
Yeah, 8. That's right.
Ooh, nice.
So you had a black and a white, and then green, red, and blue, and the black and the white can mix with those three. So you got like, a light green, green, dark green. If you do all the math there, all the combinations, you get 8 colors. But now, how many colors do you think the Atari 2600 has, Wes?
That's tough because in the games that I reviewed, I feel like I saw at least like 12, but maybe not.
It's 128 colors.
So I guess I might have seen 12.
Yeah. That is a lot of colors, man. And actually, I think it's not more because at the time, color TVs could only display 128 colors. So, yeah, that's going to be a big deal later.
That's quite a jump.
Yeah, and then resolution, because I was thinking, like, okay, the RCA Studio 2 had kind of a tank game. Fairchild had a tank game. You're going to review a tank game today. And each one, the sprites for the tank are a little bit different. I thought the RCA Studio 2 had the worst kind of resolution, and the tanks looked the worst and were like the most blown up, right? So I kind of wanted to just get a firm number on that. So the RCA Studio 2 was 64 by 32 pixels, which is kind of equivalent to like 32p. If you know like 1080p from YouTube videos today, like imagine you only have 32. that's all the RCA Studio 2 had. The Fairchild was notably better. It was 64p, so double that. And that's why it looks way better. And then the Atari 2600 does some weird stuff. It apparently is variable depending on the game. But for like a rough estimate, I thought about 80p is a good kind of general estimate. So it's still definitely better than the Fairchild, but not as big of a jump as the doubling the Fairchild did to the RCA Studio 2. But still, I'll take another 16 pixels for my gaming. So there's some of the specs behind it. And then quickly talking about what the actual hardware looked like. The console itself, I think, is very kind of boring. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of black. It has a kind of a wood grain thing going on. It has a couple switches that maybe we can get into later when we talk about the games. But the thing that really interests me about the hardware is the controller port, because it had controller ports. Usually the controllers are either embedded in the console or, they are wired, but I'm not sure if the wires could come out of the other ones or if they're always in all the time. But these ones you could obviously like plug in, and they made it in such a way where it encouraged like different controller designs for the console. So like Atari itself, they have their standard joystick, which is kind of just a normal, kind of looks like a flight stick or something with a button on the side. But then right from the very beginning, they had one that was specifically for Pong games. So that one's more of like a dial and a button on the side. They had one that was a driving controller, which was essentially a different dial, but you couldn't continuously turn it forever. It kind of stopped after a certain amount of turning it, like a steering wheel would, I guess. But they had tons. They had one that was like a keyboard numpad type design, and they also encourage third-party designs, including like touchpads and stuff. So really crazy that all these different controllers were like available and actually used in the games.
Yeah, it's crazy that there's that much variation to it. And I mean, part of why this console had an incredibly long life. I mean, it stayed around for many, many years.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of all I had. What do you think, Wes? I love the colors. When I found that, I was like 128 colors. I will say quickly, by the way, there are some limitations with that. Like you can't have 128 colors on the screen at one time, I don't think. I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but there are some limitations there. But what really comes across is really every single game that we see is going to look a little bit different from everything else that we've seen, which is going to be awesome. So
yeah. And they use it to great effect with kind of giving modes different feels as well. But yeah. I guess don't want to talk about it too much because that'll be a lot of what we're talking about, I'm sure, in our reviews on the timeline. So with that said, do you think it's time to get straight into it?
Let's do it.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back from that short break, and now we are going to get started by taking a look at the 9 games that released on the Atari 2600 console in September of 1977. We are going to cover in depth 5 of them today, keeping in mind that these are video cartridges which often had many games on them, and then we're going to leave the other 4 for honorable mentions in between. So, Ben, why don't you get us started off with the first one?
Thank you, Wes. So, this is going to be maybe a longer one. I tried to shorten these as much as possible, but these games are so good. We had to review 5, and even the honorable mentions might be a little bit extended, so we'll see. But this first one that I'm going to cover is called Air Sea Battle, and yeah, there's 27 games on this cartridge, Wes. 27. That is a lot of games. I'm not going to cover every single one because, like, sometimes it's just as simple as, like, oh, this one has straight shots and this one has guided shots, with the English on it. And now we've got twice the number of games, but it's kind of weird how they did it. They didn't allow every option for every game, which I thought was interesting. But just going through what Air Sea Battle is, it's really kind of like Drop Zone 4, but also anti-aircraft at the same time. So basically, you've got planes moving up ahead, and sometimes you can be the plane and drop down bombs on ships below you, or sometimes you could be the ship and shooting up and shooting airplanes out of the sky, or even being kind of a static artillery piece and just like working the angles right and timing your shots out to hit down aircraft into the sky. That's like a general overview of it, but there's a bunch of like other little changes you can make to get all the variations of this cartridge. So firstly, I want to say that the game was developed by Larry Kaplan, obviously part of Atari at the time, but he would actually later go and co-fund the beginning of Activision. So we already have like some Activision founders making some Atari cartridges. And how the game worked, each player, like I mentioned, controlled either a ship or an artillery piece, or I think some of them were called subs and some of them were also bombers. But how the general gameplay for all of them worked was the first person to reach 99 points won the game, or whoever had the most points by the end of the timer also won. And the timer was 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Did you also have that, Wes? I feel like it was a very strange time.
Yeah, so it must have been either this thing that they picked or like some internal weird timing on the system, because that was the same for my games as well.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's just kind of a weird time, but yes, 2 minutes, 16 seconds. Each player can only fire or have one bullet on the screen at a time, which is kind of annoying. In addition to that, you also had the straight shots and the guided shots, which were somewhat with the English control. I did play this game, and I found the English controlled missiles quite hard to use. Maybe it'd be easier on the actual joystick that it's supposed to be played with instead of on a keyboard. But the bullet kind of just goes, and you can kind of shift it a little bit left or right, but it's kind of just moving straight and fast the whole time, essentially. So it's not like you can do 360s with the bullet like sometimes the English can do. But you had that, and you also had a difficulty switch that made the bullets larger or smaller that you could switch on. Some of the game modes were one player versus another player, but some of the game modes were also one player versus AI, and the AI in this case doesn't move and just like it's set up so that it hits like maybe the center of the screen, and it just fires as fast as it can. And occasionally it hits stuff, but it's not the best. As far as like what stuff you're hitting, as I mentioned, there's a couple different game modes here. You can be either static pieces in the bottom shooting up at bombers at the top. You can be what they called submarines in their torpedo game, which was essentially a static artillery piece at the bottom, but you could move left to right, but you could only like fire straight up, right? You also had a shooting gallery version, which you could move left to right on the bottom and change your angle of the gun. They had one where your ship shooting up at the bombers. You had bombers shooting down at the ship. And then finally, the last version was one person is a bomber and the other person is a ship, which I thought was cool. And also, I want to quickly say that the the ships and the bombers would move constantly. You could increase or decrease the speed at which they moved, but they couldn't be static like the submarines or the artillery pieces were. They were always moving no matter what. And as far as what you're shooting at other like jet fighters and aircraft carriers and submarines and different boats. For the shooting gallery ones, for some reason, you're shooting at rabbits, ducks, and clown faces, which is a really weird one to have in the middle of all this. And also, in addition to all of that, there were also some game modes that added just straight up obstructions. They weren't like negative points if you hit them. It was just like you just lost your shot, essentially. For some of the ones where you're a boat, the obstructions are mines that go across the screen, and then for the ones that you're a plane, they're blimps. So a lot of things here, but I think that's a good general overview of the 27 games. That doesn't go too in depth.
Right.
So let's just get into the ratings. Let's start out with my favorite part about this game by far is the graphics. Okay, we have straight up Drop Zone 4 level graphics here, like in color. No, well, what was the one that was in color, Wes? That you did that one.
Oh,
Do you
no.
remember what that was called?
I'm totally blanking.
Bombs Away.
Oh, I don't even remember that. Whoops. But yes.
Yeah, anyway, we have a gradient sky background. And in some of the ones where you're on like a piece of land at the bottom, you also have a different color for the land as well. But I counted them up. We have 8 different gradients for the sky, from a light blue to a dark blue.
Oh, wow.
Which is awesome. And then having the green at the bottom for land sometimes, it's like so nice to look at. And in addition to that, we have the jets, the ships, the submarines. There's like a helicopter looking one. There are so many sprites in this game, I couldn't even count them. From the rabbits to the ducks to the clown faces, which do look terrifying. There's just a lot going on, and it all just looks great. I mean, the colors are just fantastic. To have something with gradient colors on a console, we've just never seen this before. To me, this is like a new territory for console gaming, and I gave it a 4.25 out of 10. I don't know if that seems too high or not. To me, it's right where it should be. But it's really good to look at. Compared to what we've been normally looking at, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 4.25 for the graphics for me. Let's move on to gameplay. This one's still high, but not quite as high. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. And the reason it's that high, first of all, is you have so many different variations here. It's crazy. I feel like with each of these, we've seen it before, or even arcade machines, they're like different games. Like having a bomber versus ship game is normally different from like a shooting gallery game, or anti-aircraft, which was a different arcade machine game. I mean, there's just so many different things here. It's awesome. And every single one has like little things that distinguish it from the other ones. Even like the shooting gallery game, on that one, the ducks and rabbits and clowns and stuff, they can actually change direction as they go across the screen, which is different from every other game on this cartridge.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So there's like something that's a little bit different, a little bit interesting in just about every single one of these, even though the concept of it's more kind of like a timing game and an angling shooting kind of game. And that's kind of the same for all of them. But there's something that's a little bit different for every single one that just makes it worth playing at least a couple times, which is awesome because there's apparently 27 versions. So there's a lot to do. And I love that. The things that I don't like about it, only being able to have one bullet on screen per person is not the best. And then I also don't like, this is something somebody else I was watching brought up, and that's that for some of the game modes, like the ones when you're a ship, you can actually change the speed of the ship by going like forward or backward on your controller, but you can't change the speed while one of your bullets is on the screen, which is a weird thing, I think. It would probably feel like super jank.
Yeah.
So,
weird.
I was like, okay, that is kind of weird. But overall, I thought it was quite good, and I would totally have fun with this. The AI is another thing that I point to as being not the best, considering it, you can pretty easily outplay it. There's no real hard mode if you're playing one player, but 2 player would be awesome. So just a 3.5 out of 10. That's still really high and really good, especially for a console game. For sound, I gave it 3.25. The sounds in this are really crazy. I feel like I'm hearing sounds like I've never heard before, Wes, compared to our timeline. I don't know if you've kind of got the same thing, but there's these weird they're kind of like raises and falls in pitch that they kind of sound like the jumping sound from Mario, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. Is it sort of like the stereotypical bomb drop whistle, or
Kinda, but it can also be like going up, you know what I mean? It can be
yeah,
reversed. So you hear that a lot, which we don't usually hear stuff like that. Normally it's just bleeps and bloops, but that's like actually kind of interesting to me. You still have like nice explosion sounds, and the way they did 2-player in this game, as far as the sound goes, is really cool because you can very clearly distinguish both players in terms of just sound, because when they hit something, like that sound of it exploding is different depending on which player hit it. So it's really easy to tell from the sound, like if your opponent is doing well or not. And you have sounds for firing, sounds for hitting things, sounds for like just like doing well, like at the end if you've won. So just about everything you could think of other than straight music is kind of here. Some of it is very repetitive and gets on your nerves a little bit. But overall, I thought just for the sound design, in terms of especially each player sounding different from each other, made me go 3.25 out of 10 for sound, because I thought all the sounds are super unique. They don't remind me of Pong at all, which is great. And just in general, they sound pretty good, I thought. That makes me come to relevance. Now, usually for the first game in a new console, we kind of include the console and the relevance. So I did that here with this one. I'm not going to do it with the other ones. But in this one, with the console itself and how much the console is going to make an impact on the industry as a whole, I had to give it a 9 out of 10. Anything less was just like, couldn't be, it had to be at least that.
absolutely.
So I gave it a 9 out of 10. This is going to change the way people play games, like straight up. And this game is awesome. This game, I feel like, by far is the best looking game I've ever played on a console. Maybe the Ultra Pong with the rainbow graphics is maybe a little bit better, but this is just one cartridge, like there's going to be so many more after this that all uses the same hardware for the graphics and stuff. It's just, and having 27 games on a cartridge, like that's never been done. I mean, I'm thinking back to like the Fairchild has like Blackjack, like that's one game on the cartridge, you know what I mean? Or maybe 5 or 6, not 27. And they're all like pretty uniquely different, at least in one way or another. I'm not saying they're the most unique things, but they're pretty different considering that there's 27 of them. And, does playing like a ship really feel a lot different from playing as a plane? Maybe not, but even just seeing all the different sprites for like whether or not you're dropping bombs on ships or shooting up at different types of sprites in the sky, it makes it different. And also the patterns that all the sprites come in at, all the enemies, like for some of the ones where you're at the bottom shooting up at planes, the planes will come in either 2 at a time or kind of in a formation, like maybe 4 or 5 at a time, whereas some of the other ones, they're a lot more kind of random feeling, and you have kind of like the more old school where there's some that are moving slow, some that move really fast, but it's different from the formations and stuff that you see in some of the other ones. So everyone has their little thing that makes it a little bit different, which is awesome. So I just gave it a 9 out of 10. I mean, super relevant and cool, and I'm sure that these 9 launch titles influenced a lot in terms of the history of video gaming. So, and then overall, 3.75 out of 10. This is a great one. I loved it. Just the colors alone are worth picking up, in my opinion. And I'm sure, in comparison to maybe some of the future Atari 2600 ones, this one probably won't be the best. But just in terms of what we've been seeing, it's in a different league, in my opinion. So yeah, that was the Air Sea Battle West. What'd you think? Hopefully it
That's
made sense because it's hard to talk about 27 games.
it is, yeah. And I'm sure part of it made sense to me because I've also reviewed two cartridges that were 27 games each. So I kind of get the drill. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's I'm tentative to go in and talk about a bunch of it because I think you're going to see a lot of similarities in how I review combat, specifically combat and air sea battle. Definitely a lot of notable differences, but Atari being Atari and being smart, there's a lot of similarities too in how they kind of switch around all the game modes and stuff like that.
right.
So yeah, it sounds awesome.
By the way, I don't think we mentioned this, but Sears also released a version of the 2600. I forget what they called it, but all of these games also, we have the Sears version of the game name. We probably won't reference it that much, but if you wanted to know what it was called, Air Sea Battle is called Target Fun in the Sears version. So if anybody gets those confused, I think the Sears version of the 2600, especially in the beginning, or it might not have even come out till 78 if I'm honest. I'm not sure, but I think the Sears version did really well like overseas. So depending on where you're from, it could be a little different, but the games are the same. I think with that, well, you were talking about the combat, West. Why don't you just head on right on over into combat, and I can't wait to hear what you thought about this.
I can't wait to talk about it, and I think you might have saved me a little bit of the heavy lifting and having to talk about some of the control schemes and how the different modes play, but there's still so much to talk about for combat.
Yeah.
Combat, also known as Tank Plus for the Sears version, was the release title for these all released with the console, but this is one that was included in the bundle with the two controllers. That kind of got me extra hyped and jazzed about
Yeah.
it too. I mean, it's like called Combat. It's based off of the Tank arcade games and Jet Fighter arcade games. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. It is 27 different games as well, and I'm thinking that all of them might have 27, unless some of yours didn't, but the one I'm
No,
going.
some of mine don't.
Okay, so maybe that was just a trend for a few of them, but this one also does have 27 different games. Similar to how Ben mentioned, a lot of them are variations, and not all of them had all of the options enabled. They actually, at the end of their instruction manual, have this giant table of all the different
Yeah.
game modifiers and types of games, so you can see all the ones that are available on this cartridge, which is really helpful. It's a great illustration, but it is kind of weird that they're like, hey, all these other quote unquote game modes you can't play.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it doesn't end up mattering, but it's funny that they decided to illustrate it that way. And keeping on the topic of the manual for all of these were incredible. I mean, like,
Yeah, they were.
instruction manuals for games, I guess, is today you might not really think about as being super relevant. I mean, maybe in the aspect of like a tutorial level, you expect that to be pretty good, but these were just like gave you a diagram of how to use the controller to control in all the different games and like described each game in detail. It was really good. And also for somebody who's going back to review it and trying to play all these games, it's super helpful. So talking about the controllers, it's really important in Tank that you are using the joystick controller and that it has 8 movement directions. So that's going to come into play a lot with how all of these control. So as quickly as I can, I'm going to try and break down all of the main game modes, the variations, how you control them, and kind of what makes them special. For all of these game modes, there also is a sort of handicap switch, like Ben was talking about in Air Sea Battle. But instead of making the bullet larger, like it did in this one, it makes the missile range shorter, and it makes one player move slower than the other player. So one of the main games for this is, of course, Tank. In Tank, you are stopped most of the time. You aren't constantly moving like some of the other games, and you can only move forward, left, right, and then angled forward, left, and forward, right. You can also turn, and like when you turn left, you kind of have several degrees before you go straight left, so you did have more direction of movement, but sort of typical Tank controls, at least in games, you can't go in reverse. Now, getting into the Tank variations, you could play on 3 different maps. There was either an open field, an easy maze or a complex maze with barriers, sort of like typical tank game that block the way. You could play with either straight or guided missiles, same as air-sea battle. And the guided missiles, you steer them with your normal left and right control. So it's a little weird because I think your tank just stopped moving when you controlled the missile. So I didn't find them super useful. I'd rather just the straight ones, honestly. And then another big variation of tank is this new game mode they had called Tank Pong, which is just a tank game, but the projectiles ricochet like 5 or 6 times off of any barriers or walls that they hit. It's pretty crazy, and they had 2 different sub modes for this too, where you had either direct hit mode, where the ball still bounced everywhere, but it didn't have to bounce before hitting an opposing tank to score points. Whereas in billiard mode, it had to bounce at least once before hitting an opponent to score a point.
Trick shots.
Basically, yeah. So they all still had the nice bounces in them, but different scoring methods where they called it a billiard hit and it had to bounce off a wall or a barrier first before you scored any points. And all of these modes could be played also on all 3 of the maps, except for some reason, I think direct hit couldn't be played in open field. There's some weird arbitrary decisions to get to 27 games, or
yeah,
I don't know exactly why. So both these modes could also be played with another modifier, which was called invisible tanks, where both players are invisible except when they shoot, get hit, or hit a wall or barrier. In the regular tank mode, when you're playing invisible tank, you could only play guided missile mode on an open field or easy maze, and in Tank Pong, you could only play on easy or open field. So that's pretty much it for all the tank modes. But then you got to remember that this also has plane modes in it. That's why it's called combat, not just tank, which is kind of nuts. The biplane controls, I really like. Part of the reason I think this one is so cool is that they switch it up a little bit. Tank is top down, biplane is horizontal view, like other biplane arcade cabinets we've seen. Mm-hmm. So it would be confusing if you're switching between the two, but I like that there's a difference in the controls where instead of, up is move forward, your move forward is right and your move backwards is left. Except since it's a plane game, you're always moving, and left is just slower movement, neutral is medium movement, and right is fast movement. It also has a sort of this weird inverted control scheme where when you hit up, you dive, and then when you hit down, you go up. But I think that's typical for plane games anyway.
Yeah, one of mine had that.
I could see being frustrating because on a cartridge and everything controls differently, but I also think it helps give the game like different feel. It kind of makes it feel like, okay, I'm flying a biplane now. So getting into the biplane variations, you could play versus with straighter guided missiles, or machine gun, which was basically the missiles had a shorter, I guess, lifespan or distance, if you want to call it that. And since they disappeared faster, you could shoot more of them, and you're basically like shooting really rapid fire at really close range.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's a really awesome mode that the biplane one had. And you could play all these on either a map with 2 clouds in the middle or open sky. The clouds aren't like the barriers, they don't have any collision, but your plane just kind of flies behind it on the screen. So you could actually hide yourself a bit in these big clouds and then just pop out from a different angle that your opponent's not expecting. Another variation is that you could either play 1v1, 2v2, or 3v1. All of these modes are still 2-player. In 2v2, it's just you have like 2 ships or 2 biplanes that sort of follow each other and shoot at the same time, and you control them at the same time, and it's just you each control 2 ships. But then 3v1 is weird. 1 player controls 3 ships, same way as the 2v2. You have 3 in a line that kind of fly all together and shoot all together. But then 1 player is the quote-unquote bomber, which is just a gigantic biplane. The mode itself is a little weird because the biplane doesn't like take extra hits or anything. It's just kind of big, and you can only shoot like 1 bullet at a time as a bomber, and it still goes straight forward. But it's at least an interesting and slightly different mode. And then, as if that wasn't enough, there are now the jet fighter games on this as well. And those are pretty similar to all of the biplane modes, except they're top down, so they control a little bit like a hybrid between the tank controls and the biplane controls, where you're always moving, but up is fast and down is slow. And for the jet fighter game variations, you could do pretty much the same as biplane. You either had cloud or open maps for 1v1 and 2v2. You could use straight or guided missiles, but no machine gun on the jet fighter games. And you also had a 1v3 mode with guided missiles on an open map, except in this, the one player was just the same size as the other three players, or the other three ships for the other player. So it was more of like a uneven versus kind of thing, which was pretty interesting. So finally, with all that description, let's get into my ratings for this. For graphics, I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. Looking at the graphics as a whole, I would say they're the models are slightly more detailed than the Fairchild, but the benefit really comes from just the amount of variation across all of these, same as with Air Sea Battle. I noticed there are at least 4 different backgrounds. There might be like 12 different backgrounds for all the different sub-variations and modes. There's several different colors for the players and the scores. There's some like really interesting ones. It's a huge spectrum, but there's like magentas, like cyan, like really bright greens and super dark reds and oranges and yellows and blues. And just lots of colors that we haven't really seen on other consoles. So visually it was pretty interesting, even though the background was flat in this and it didn't have the gradient like Air Sea Battle. There also are 3 different player models for both the tanks, the biplanes, and the jets, which all look pretty good. There's a blown up version of the biplane in the bomber mode, but that one actually doesn't look that great just because it's a gigantic version of the biplane. But aside from that, everything about it just looks super crisp. It flows well. As we were talking about the refresh rate, it just like looks smooth as you're playing it. The missiles are a bit tiny and hard to see, but once you get used to that, you can track them easy enough. And then there's also tons of different, either like flipped versions of the same sprite or slightly different sprites for all the different angles that these planes and tanks can go at, which is a lot of different angles. So just overall, it's really impressive graphically, especially for a console game. And then moving on to the sound, I also gave that a 3.5. The sounds in this are almost as good, if not as good, as some of the great arcade cabinets we've seen in like early 77, late 76. It's kind of nuts. All of the game modes use the same missile shot and hit sounds, but they're all really good. Sort of like a nice explosion and a good missile shoot sound that also sounds really great in the machine gun mode because it's just rattling off so fast and it can play that sound really well without like clipping over itself or anything. Tank Pong is also interesting because it was kind of nice to be able to hear a little bit of Pong sounds in this because it's only in one game mode, so I don't get tired of it too much. But there's Pong sounds whenever the bullet bounces off the walls, and each time it hits a wall in succession, it gets a slightly higher pitch, which is cool. So it gives you this sort of like boop, 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 boop effect whenever it's bouncing off of all these corners, which is really nice. And then in all the games, there are sort of a like low droning idle or engine noise for the vehicles. But thankfully, I want to say it's the same sound, just at different pitches. It's hard to tell, but the way they do it is great. The jet sounds like an actual jet engine in arcade form, it's like got sort of this airy hissiness to it, whereas there's a bassy and garbled tank sound, and then the biplane is just sort of like somewhere in between both of those. So even though it's all similar idling sounds, they all sound distinct and really good. And just the fact that you're hearing this many sounds coming out of a console is mind-blowing for 77. So then moving into my gameplay rating, I gave it a 4 out of 10. It's definitely one of those games that's like, hey, we have 27 games, but really just a lot of variations. This is one of the ones where I think the largest amount of those variations are actually really impactful to the gameplay.
Yeah.
The different map options are all nice. The clouds, the barriers, they actually make a difference. The invisible mode is actually interesting and fun, and unlike the weird sort of invisible modes in the maze game that I just rated on the Fairchild, they seem like a nice addition because even though you're invisible, there's enough triggers to see the tank that makes it like playable. Tank Pong, even though it's just kind of this weird mishmash, I think is also a really interesting spin on the tank mode. And the fact that they could all be played with the added fire options of guided or straight missile is also really cool. Biplane and Jet really feel pretty similar, but I think they did a smart thing by making Biplane the side view, because it makes it feel just different enough that I could see wanting to play one over the other. The 2v2 and 3v1 modes honestly are a little bit weird, especially the 3v1 bomber mode, since the bomber only takes one hit and the three other ships also only take one hit and then all three of them are gone, but it just seems kind of hard to coordinate. But it's at least a nice option to have, and it's different enough that it's like, this is definitely a different game mode or a different game.
Yeah. I feel like when you have 27 games, like if one of them is like kind of weird, it's like, yeah, but it's just like, you can just play it once and play the other 26, you know?
Right,
It's not a
yeah.
big deal.
I mean, compared to discrete logic consoles where it's been like 34 games and like four of the games are different, this is like
Yeah.
27 games and like 18 or 20 of them are different. And that's
Right.
pretty dang good. Like,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of variation there. My favorite of which, though, on this is probably the machine gun mode on Biplane, just because
Oh, yeah.
it totally changes the playstyle. You have to get like right up next to the other plane to shoot it, and it really feels like like World War One biplane, or yeah, where you're just like right up there, like with the rat. It's super cool. But that being said, there's just tons of cool gameplay variations. It plays smoothly, so I gave it a pretty dang high 4 out of 10 for gameplay.
Nice.
And for relevance, it was tough, as you mentioned. I didn't want to rate it solely on the console, but then I basically did because this is the release title for the VCS, the 2600, since it's the one that came out with it when you bought it. So I gave it an 8.5 out of 10 after writing 9 and deleting it, and then writing 8.5 a couple times. I could give it a 9 as well. I mean, it's just, you pretty much said it all, but it's the console itself, incredibly relevant. Combat does tons of crazy stuff, makes a super playable version of Tank and Jet Fighter on console. All these crazy sounds, I mean, I don't want to overstate it too much. It's super relevant, basically. And that total gave me a rating of 4 out of 10. It could be because this is the first Atari 2600 game that I rated, and I'm just super pumped, but I think it's incredible for a home console in 77. Just the amount of stuff that you get to do in combat and the game modes themselves being actually like fun and interesting and competitive, I think it's just great all around. It does so much more than all other console cartridge games of the time, and it just feels like you're getting a ton of gameplay from all the different modes. I even was going as far to say it seems like it could be on par with arcade cabinets of 1976, which is kind of saying a lot when like arcade cabinets used to be years ahead of consoles.
Yeah. No, I'm right with you there. You talked about, I talked about it too. Like, I feel like the variations, like when they're making them, they just made so many great decisions as to, okay, this is something that we only added clouds. It's like, but you can hide behind the clouds, so it's different. It feels different. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There's just so many great examples of every single one of these. It's just a small thing that they change, but it's enough to make it, oh, I kind of want to play this one now, you know? Even like the 2v2, it's like, okay, both players have 2 planes. Yeah, but we're firing 2 shots at a time. Like, it feels different. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that.
Yeah, so that's combat. I mean, there's not enough I can say about it. Go look it up. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a break from our ratings. Let's do 2 quick honorable mentions and then head back on over there. So the first one we have here that I was tempted to review all these, like I have to say. I was tempted to make this 2 episodes and review all of them, but as you'll see, these ones that we skip, they're not too like important, I don't think. This one's called Basic Math. The series version is called Fun with Numbers, and we have one of these on every console, but it's essentially solve a bunch of math equations. And just like the other ones, it says 4 operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. But unlike the other ones, this one actually has some nice additions, I think. It actually played a music melody when you won or lost, which, oh my god, have we ever heard of a music melody on a console before? I mean, we've only heard it like on a handful of arcade games. I mean, just the Gunfighter Boot Hill like games and like one or two others. For it to be like in this random cartridge of math games on the 2600s, like what? How did they do that?
Yeah, really.
So I'm gonna play a clip of that sound file for you guys right now, even though it's an honorable mention because it's worth listening to. And then after that, there's also something else that they do with the sound, which is that instead of having a timer for how long you have to answer the question correctly, instead it just plays a little beep. But then as you kind of wait longer and longer to answer the question, the beep gets faster and faster and faster and faster until you know that you're out of time. Which is
nice.
Like, I know, I feel like I've never heard that either, and it's so good. And it's in this math game. But yeah, it's pretty cool. You guys would have heard that already.
And then next up for our honorable mentions, we have Blackjack, which is a 1 to 3 player blackjack. Looks pretty similar to the Fairchild version that we saw, but it does have some additional options like being able to play either casino or private blackjack rules.
Do you know what those are, Wes? I feel like you would know better than I do. I read through the manual, and I think part of it is when it decides to reshuffle the deck, because I guess if you let it go through all the cards, you can card count, I guess. I don't know. And private blackjack, you can't do that, I guess, because after like 20 cards, they reshuffle. I don't know.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, but it did that. Let's move on to the big ones now, the other good ones. I'm going to talk about Indy 500, which is a racing game. This is essentially Grand Track 10 on the 2600. And I don't know if that sounds that interesting. When I first looked at it, I was like, yeah, okay, it's kind of what I expected. And it kind of is, but just like all the other ones, there are a ton of variations. So some of them are better than others. But before I get into it, I want to quickly mention this game was developed, at least in part, or the lead developer was Carla Menensky, who was one of the only female developers at Atari. So that was cool. And then with basically every single one of these game modes, there is no AI. You can either race by yourself via a time trial option or race against another human. First to 25 laps wins, or first person to get the most laps in a certain amount of time wins. But as far as the game and the variations themselves, you had a very standard Grand Track 10 top-down view setup of the driving game. And I should mention also, in this driving game, you were required to have the driving controller peripheral to plug into. You couldn't use the joystick with this, which was kind of cool. So I love that they were like pushing that as early as, when the console first launched. So essentially, you got your standard driving game. You have 2 different tracks for the normal races. You then have a version called Tag, which is when one car kind of like blinks and the other car has to go and try to tag it. I think whoever is it at the end of the time loses. You then have a version called Crash and Score, where you have 2 different tracks. All of these modes, by the way, had 2 different tracks. So all these tracks are different from the last version's 2 different tracks. But the Crash and Score tracks basically were a little bit more open, and then random dots would appear on the screen, and you had to go and drive over them to collect them, and then a new one would pop up somewhere randomly. That was actually probably my favorite game mode, just because it was very hectic, and I felt like it could go back and forth a lot. After that, we have 2 more modes here. It's 2 more tracks, but they're icy tracks, which is very interesting. The icy tracks have a lot of drift. Like, I would say it's pretty reminiscent of like Ice and Mario or something like that, where just a
Oh,
little
yikes.
bit will really. I mean, it's you have to go pretty slow if you want to make those turns. It's pretty icy. But those are all the variations. It's not as many as the other ones. I think there might be like 14 variations in total or something like that. But that's kind of it. As far as what I thought of it, well, let's just get into the scores.
Ooh.
So let's start out here with gameplay. I thought this was one of the better aspects of this game, just driving and racing games in general. Like I'm pretty on board with Grand Track 10. We've seen it a lot, and the actual just like base racing games, the tracks themselves, they're pretty simple. I mean, the resolution compared to the resolution we find on arcade machines is still very low. So we're dealing with basic ovals or like figure eight kind of shapes here for the tracks. So they're not really that interesting. All of them do have different color palettes and stuff, but the tracks themselves aren't very interesting. We do have some of the game modes where, such as Crash and Score, where you collect the little points as they appear on the screen. I really love those ones, and some of them even have sections of the map where part of the boundaries are not filled in, so you can actually wrap around the screen in certain places, which I thought was cool. It was a nice little addition. And then Tag, I don't know what to say about it. It's kind of like we've seen it a couple times. I think it's a good addition to have, but it's not like something I'm looking for. And then the icy tracks I've never really seen before. I don't think it'd be that much fun because it's so hard to control.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe if you're really good at it, it could be a lot of fun. In general, I tried to play this game in an emulator, and you just cannot play it on a keyboard. It's like impossible. I'm sure
I
with
believe
the
that.
with the driving controller, I'm sure it would have been fine, but it was kind of hard for me to judge. But overall, I gave it a 3 out of 10, which to me is like it has a good amount of variety there. It does what it does pretty good. I think the real standout for me is Crash and Score, just because we don't see that a lot, and it is a little bit of a more interesting version of racing, if that makes sense. So a little bit more hectic, definitely a lot more head-on collisions and stuff. But the downsides to this cartridge are really there's no AI, and I think that hurts it quite a bit. And then some of the modes I just don't think are that fun, like the icy tracks. But overall, 3 out of 10. I was pretty happy playing this. For graphics, I gave it only a 2.5 out of 10. I mean, every track is a different color and stuff, but the tracks themselves, the designs are pretty basic. The car designs are pretty basic. I feel like it's like equivalent looking to similar consoles at the time that basically only did racing. And we've seen a couple of those. We've reviewed several of those. So it didn't feel like next gen or anything. It was kind of what I expected. So the graphics, they could have pushed it a little bit more, I thought, here. But as it stands, it's just kind of what I expected. For sound, this is the lowest one of the sound for all the games I rated today at a 2.25 out of 10. The general humming of the engines is great, and because there's two sound channels, you get like different sounds if both players are racing really well, and if that happens, it sounds awesome, I think. The downside to the sound is, especially with Crash and Score, my favorite option, whenever you collect one of those points on the screen, you get this terribly loud and like awful sounding ding, which is
No.
it gets on your mind so badly. And there's a couple other instances of those dings throughout the games, but it's particularly bad on Crash and Score. I think it happens on Tag as well whenever you get tagged and stuff. So some of the sounds are really irritating to me. But the engine sounds are good, the crash sounds are fine. I don't think there's really any drifting sounds. If there is, they weren't that noticeable to me. You can't drift, by the way, in the normal game modes, only on the icy one. You can kind of drift a little bit. Yeah, so the engine sounds were good. The additional effects, just I could use without. And then for relevance, right? I'm already at relevance. relevance, I did 6.5 out of 10. It's part of the Atari 2600 launch lineup. It has to be somewhat relevant. It sold a lot. I'm sure it was one of the ones people looked at first, along with Combat and Air Sea Battle. But we've seen this type of game design before, and it made some innovations in terms of its variations and different types of gameplay styles. It kind of combines a lot of things I've seen in other games. Like we might have seen a game that did racing well, or that did a crash and score type game, or that did tag, but we've not seen it all in one game or in one cartridge. So that was really cool. And then overall, I just gave it 2.75 out of 10. I think it's a pretty good racing game, equivalent to like a racing console, like a first gen console dedicated to racing. That's basically what this does, but it's in one cartridge. So that's pretty
Right.
cool. Not as cool as the other one, but as Air Sea Combat or Combat, but I still thought it was pretty cool, and it had some interesting variations. The icy is kind of weird.
It's a little weird, but I like that it has the Indy 500 name too. Like
Yeah,
getting
that's
that in
true.
there, getting some kind of Grand Track sort of racing game on the console. I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, because Atari did they do own the indie, or they don't own, but they've released some indie stuff. So
At least
yeah,
the key games, right, was the Indy line.
yep.
Cool. Well, that sounds pretty sweet. And I think we should get straight into another slightly weird racing cartridge that I got to cover next, Street Racer. And I don't know. I go back and forth about this one, but let me get straight into it. It's called Street Racer. Speedway 2 was the Sears name for it, and the main developer on this was Larry Kaplan. Reportedly, this was made so that the Atari 2600 would have a reason to sell the paddle controller. So we're starting to see a bit of a trend here
Huh.
where they're like, hey, let's make this game so that we can sell this type of controller. The paddle controller was basically a dial, sort of like typical Pong style controller where you're just doing the dial the whole time, but it did have one button on it for additional controls. In this one, same as Air Sea Battle, all the modes lasted 2 minutes and 16 seconds, or until one player got 99 points. And the main advertised game modes for this were Street Racer, Slalom, Dodge'em, Jet Shooter, Number Cruncher, which is hilarious, and Scoop Ball. And it stated that Larry Kaplan, having revisited this and look at this game, he said that he would wish he would have been able to do scrolling graphics on it, but apparently he tried doing that and it just kind of jittered all over the place. So this is sort of like a speedway style game, or like highway almost, where it's just a single track that you're racing up, but the track doesn't have any indication that anything's moving other than cars coming down from the top of the screen. So visually, off the bat, that's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But getting into a quick breakdown of just what all the modes are. Street Racer was 1, 2, 3, or 4 players, where you are dodging cars that are coming from the top of the screen, and your car is always at the bottom of the screen and can only move left or right using the dial. In the 3 or 4 player modes, it's a little weird because it's kind of a split screen between 2 players. So the additional players share a lane with either player 1 or player 2 or both, depending on how many players you have. And they're just basically positioned further up the lane than the player 1 or player 2. So you don't get a lot of space to dodge everything that's coming in. There's optional game modes for 2v2 or free-for-all scoring, and there's also an optional 2-player game mode where cars come from the top 2 at a time instead of only one on the screen at a time that you have to dodge. You basically, in this mode, get points for each car dodged and lose a point if the car is hit, but only if you have the expert mode switch on. Slalom is pretty similar. It's 1 to 4 players, and it's almost exactly the same as Street Race, except instead of a car, you are now a skier. And there's actually a little model, like a guy standing on skis, sort of. You have to dodge through openings in gates and walls, or that are basically walls with holes in them as you go through. And you can hit the button on the controller to actually increase the speed of the whole course so that it comes like flying at you. This one was real weird, is all I'm going to say about that right now.
It reminded me. I don't know if it reminded. Do you know that like Japanese game show where they fit through the wall?
Yes, yeah.
That's kind of what it reminded me of.
It basically is that you got to fit the ski through the tiny hole in the wall, but the fast speed is just so fast. So like the wall just comes flying straight down at you.
Yeah.
The next mode that we have is Dodge 'em, which is a 1 or 2 player mode. This time you actually move forward on the track and move up the track by holding down the button, but when you let go of it, you slide back down the track, and you have to dodge these bouncing obstacles until you reach the top of the screen, you get a point, and then you start again at the bottom. The main difference between this is that you have to accelerate to move up the track and that you slowly go back down, and that the obstacles, instead of just going straight down from the top of the screen, kind of bounce within the lane diagonally on their way down. It can be 1 player or 2 player, or with 1 or 2 obstacles coming down at a time. Then you have Jet Shooter, which is kind of Street Racer, except instead of dodging the obstacles, you're shooting them. So you sort of look like this top-down view of a jet, and there's other opposing planes coming down at you from the top of the screen. And instead of accelerating using that one button on the controller, you now fire this sort of slow projectile up towards the top of the screen. It's a little weird because it seems like you can only have one on the screen at a time. So you basically have to wait till the plane is like right in front of you to fire, or else you'll never be able to fire again until it goes off the screen. But for this, there were both 1 and 2 player modes, with either 1 or 2 planes coming down from the top at a time. Next up, we have one that a couple of the reviewers I watched said was their favorite one, and a lot of people seem to like this, and that is Number Cruncher. This time you are a motorcycle, and there are giant numbers floating down from the top of the screen that you have to hit, and each one is worth as many points as it says. There's like 2 4s and 6s, and you have to hit them dead on to get the points, or else you crash. It's 1 to 4 players, with players 3 and 4 on players 1 and 2's teams, respectively. And basically, it's Street Racer, except you're running into all the obstacles. You're still locked at the bottom of the screen in this one, but you have to get the most points possible. And then the last one is Scoop Ball, which is Street Racer style, but 3 different types of obstacles coming down from the top of the screen, and this really interesting, weird scoring method. There's no single player in this, but there's 2, 3, and 4 players, with all the players competing. There's no teams in this one. And you're driving this scoop, which sort of looks like a pixelated forklift, I guess, or front end loader. And you have to collect the balls, which are plus signs that fall intermittently from the top of the screen. But then there's also these opposing, like, either front end loaders or aliens or boxes, I have no idea, coming from the top of the screen that if they hit you, they cause you to drop the ball that you've collected. And then there's also computer scoopers, which is what they're called in the manual, which you can deposit the ball in if you have already caught a ball, and then it gives you extra points. So there's like varying ways to score in this one. It's really weird and strange, but also really interesting. And you can speed up the track in this one too, similar to slalom, where when you hold down the button, the whole thing kind of moves faster. So with that basic yet somehow very involved description of all the different game modes that this one had, let me get into my ratings for it. For graphics, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's got all the same great color variation and different sprites, but they just don't really look as good. They're all like a bit bigger and blockier and seemingly less detailed. The cars look really similar to Speedway on the RCA Studio 2, where it's just sort of this Pinewood Derby car with wheels on sticks coming way out the side of it. But it is awesome that each of these game modes have different graphics for both the obstacles and the main vehicle, because there's cars, jets, skiers, scoopers, and motorcycles, which all look distinctly different, even if they don't all look great. The scoop is probably my favorite, just because there's so many things going on. There's like an obstacle, a scooper that you can deposit the ball into, and then a ball that you can catch. And also, when you catch the ball, it turns from like this fork at the top of the vehicle you control into a closed triangle after you catch the ball to show that like you're holding it, and then after you release it, it like goes back to its normal shape. It's this real small weird thing, but it's super satisfying because it's like, oh look, I caught it and I deposited it. It kind of reminds me of like a claw machine at like an arcade, basically what your character looks like. So graphically, I think it's pretty good, just not as impressive as Combat, with like the number of sprites and how visually interesting it is. For sounds, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It uses a lot of the same revving and idling noises, just kind of seemingly at different pitches for all the different modes, but it does give a unique feel to all the different vehicles. Most of the games just kind of have a set of beeps for scoring a point and hitting an obstacle or losing a point. And they also seem to be repeated through all the games, just at different pitches. It's kind of similar to how all the sounds were just changed and reused in different ways and different tones in combat, but it really is pretty good and does a good job at filling this with a lot more sound than we've seen in other consoles. It's just not as exciting to me as some of the other ones. Then gameplay for this, that's where this kind of takes a real hit for me. I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. There's a lot of different gameplay options, but they all feel pretty similar. Just like car at the bottom of the screen, move side to side and dodge. And that's sort of it. The 3 and 4 player modes look like they kind of sucked, to be honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a fun time. The sprites, when you have 4 players, take up like half of the screen. And there's this weird thing in the ski where if you hit a wall as the front skier, like player 4, player 2 could also spawn back in after like they're done flashing for a little bit and then hit the wall again. And since you're in like this weird team mode thing, both players in the same lane like get knocked out whenever one of them hits something. So like if player 4 hits it, then player 2 is also out, and then player 2 hits it and player 4 is also out, and it's not great basically for those modes. But I think the standouts for this, Street Racer was just kind of meh, but Dodge'em, Number Cruncher, and Scoop Ball all did something different and interesting for me. I really liked in Dodge'em that you're actually having some strategy and timing because you can move the car forward and then let it fall to sort of dodge. Number Cruncher is really hectic because there's just numbers pouring down from the top of the screen at a really fast rate. And it's actually pretty fun because the rounds are kind of short and easily repeatable. And Scoop Ball, even though it's slower paced and weird, I really like the character of it. I mean, it's just like interesting and odd. And the fact that there's a difference in gameplay of like collecting this ball to get 1 point and then depositing the ball to get an optional extra 3 points. It's pretty cool, even though they were definitely like, how the hell did we make another game for this cartridge, and just kind of like threw that together, I feel like. But it worked out really well.
Yeah. You weren't a big fan of the jet shooter, because I think I would have liked that one.
It was pretty fun, but I think I was really just turned off by the fact that like I couldn't just like shoot and anticipate something coming from the top of the screen. Like if I shot when nothing was on screen and I missed, I just lost the ship like instantly. Like it just flew past me. It just felt too slow for me, but it was pretty interesting, and it was cool that they were able to do that using basically the exact same tech as all the other Street Racer games. It's basically a Street Racer where you can shoot and it's reskinned. So it was definitely a good idea. I just didn't enjoy it as much. So then for my relevance for this, I gave it a 7 out of 10. As a launch title for the Atari 2600, I think it's pretty relevant, but I don't think this really does much interesting or was really like a selling point for the console. It's pretty cool, and it switches up the speed race style and genre a little bit, but it just doesn't feel as impactful to me as combat, basically. So then overall, I gave it a 3 out of 10. I think Street Racer does some cool stuff and showcases the capabilities of the console in different ways than combat does, but none of the games just felt super exciting. But I did like that it has great sound and visuals, of course, because of the console, and had some really unique gameplay too.
Cool.
It was an interesting one, but combat kind of blows a lot of the stuff out of water, I gotta say.
Yeah. Yeah, the 27 game modes, it'll do it.
But I am really excited to hear about what you got coming next, Ben.
Yeah. I hope everybody at home is still with us. We've got 3 to go. I only have 1 more to rate, but this next one's called Starship, and I just couldn't pass it by without rating it less. This is a version of Starship 1 on the Atari 2600, and the Starship 1 we did that, what, 3 episodes ago? It came out 2 months ago. And I guess they all the time had an idea to do it on the 2600. And it's pretty interesting. But let's go through the game modes because, of course, there can't just be one game mode, Wes. There's got to be at least 17.
Of course.
Before I get into it, I want to say I know this one was developed by Bob Whitehead, which is another co-founder of Activision. So I don't know why Atari's about to lose all their people to Activision, but it seems like it's going to happen. So again, this is based off Starship One, which is a first-person space shooter type game. And on this one, you have kind of the same game as the main version. So the enemies are still coming in a first-person perspective. They get larger and larger in their sprites as they come close to you. You're also kind of dodging asteroids and meteors. And some of the enemies can even fire at you, and you have to dodge their shot. When they fire at you, it's very slow, so it's like you can definitely dodge it. There's also, weirdly enough, a 2-player version, which seems strange because like it's a first person game. So the other person is just a sprite on the screen and then can move around, and the person who's in first person firing down at this is trying to hit player 2, and player 2 can't hit back. The only thing they can do is they can hold down one of their joystick buttons and actually go invisible for a time. So that's like their big edge, I guess.
Okay.
And then after one round, you're just supposed to switch places and see who got the most points. So it's not like the best 2-player, but it works, I guess. You also have a mode that doesn't have enemies in it. It's just, I guess, to get you more comfortable with the driving mechanics and just trying to dodge the meteors and asteroids, which are still in there. But you can also really experiment with the speed settings and trying to go really, really fast through it. So that was kind of cool, I thought. Nice little difference. That was called the warp drive game modes. Those are the Starship games. And then there's a different set of games based around Lunar Lander, which Lunar Lander is like a math game, and that's not what this is.
Right.
This version of Lunar Lander, I guess, or I'm not quite, they might have just called it that because maybe people know the name. I don't know. But basically, now instead of being first person, it's more like a side view, and you're controlling a Lunar Lander type sprite, which actually looks pretty good. And you can just move it in any direction. And periodically, little moons will spawn on the screen, and then you just have to move over to it while dodging the asteroids, kind of almost like in a Frogger type style. And then just land on the moon, which you just, as long as you're hovering over it, you're good. And then you hit a button on the joystick, and that's like you landed on it. And then another one spawns, and you have to go to that one. So it's just kind of a weird, I guess, Frogger-esque game. But it actually has a 2-player version as well, and you would think, oh, 2 lunar landers, and they're both going for the same moon. But no. Instead, one person is the moon and can just move it through space. Which seems real weird.
That's so weird.
Yeah, and then they just flip-flop turns again. So that was kind of weird. And that's kind of it. As far as the stuff that you can shoot at in the Starship games, there's 4 different enemy sprites, and then also the player 2 sprite. But the enemy sprites, they're all like pretty basic looking, but I'm going to say one's kind of like an X-Wing, one's kind of like the Enterprise, one's basically a flying saucer, and then one's called Space Robot. So those are your enemies. Something I want to talk about right away, and I'll get into my gameplay here in a second, is that the meteors and asteroids are really confusing, like super confusing. And that's because some of them can hit you, and some of them are purely aesthetic, or am I saying that right? Aesthetic. And that's really confusing, especially because the ones that you cannot hit or cannot hit you, because they're never going to be coming straight towards you, they don't like move around like other sprites do. So if you're in first person and you kind of look to the left, you went to the left because everything goes to the right, if that makes sense.
Right.
Except these meteor or these asteroids that can't hit you, they don't move to the left. They stay exactly where they are, but they're still kind of increasing in size as if they're coming towards you, but they don't move in the direction that you're looking. It's really confusing.
Yeah, it seems strange.
And at first I thought my controls weren't working because, they weren't moving correctly. I thought, oh, I'm not hitting the right buttons to move or to look around because nothing's happening. But really, they don't move, and then only enemy sprites move, which is very weird. And there can also be enemy, like, they can be kind of like a meteor shower thing that can kind of hit you. And you can dodge out of the way of that, but not these other asteroid things. So that was really confusing. And that's kind of all the games and the types of games that there are. So it's a little bit of a shorter one. But let's get into the ratings. I gave gameplay just a 2.75 out of 10. I think this is one of the poorer ones. And the reason is there's just not that much difference in the variations here. It's like, do you want enemies on or off? Do you want a player 2 or no player 2? The player 2 is like completely worthless, I think. It's not, I mean, maybe going invisible and trying to dodge shots is fun, but I don't think it'd be that fun. And the lunar lander ones are really weird. I know they're supposed to be kind of like almost like a Frogger-esque gameplay, but there's only like 6 asteroid sprites that can hurt you if you hit them. So often it's just super easy just to go right to where you're going. It's not like you're in an asteroid field where there's like 50 flying around and you have to be careful. It's like, no, there's like 4. It's like, okay, I'll just go where I want to go. So the whole lunar lander games don't really do it for me. And even the Starship games, the models just don't look as good as the arcade version. It's so weird because we just did the arcade version, so that's in everybody's minds. And it just doesn't look as good. And, the variations just didn't do it for me. For graphics, I only gave it a 2 out of 10. Because it's in space, it's mostly black and white, which kind of defeats the purpose of having 120 something colors. Some of the enemy sprites are in different colors, but in general, it's kind of just boring to look at. And the enemy sprites, even though they get bigger the closer they get to you, the like resolution and detail of the sprites doesn't get much better. It's more like, is a bad sprite from far away? Okay, now it's a bad sprite really close to you. It's right, like worse, yeah. And like I mentioned, it's really hard to tell what some of the asteroids and stuff are because some of them don't move when you look at them differently, and some of them do. So that's all really confusing. So in general, the graphics were not the best. But I mean, it's still like a console game that has perspective and is in first person. So I had to give it some points because that's pretty unusual. And then sound. This is the big one that really makes this game worth playing. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. There's no music, but all the sound effects are super reminiscent of like being in a space fight. And I think the laser sounds good. I think when enemy ships explode, it sounds good. There's these weird, like, I want to say almost droid noises and like lunar lander and stuff. It sounds like droids talking, like straight pulled from Star Wars.
Oh, weird.
And I don't really know what it's supposed to be, but the reason why you want to play this game is Star Wars, the movie, just came out. And this game makes you feel like you're in space. And you want to play this game because you want to be in space, if that makes sense. And the sound is what does that. Because the graphics aren't great, the gameplay's not great, but you're going to want to play this game just so you can feel like you're shooting down X-Wings or something, you know what I mean? That really pushes it for me. It's just super memorable. I think the sound effects, I would say they're on par with the arcade version, which is crazy.
Wow.
So very good there. And for relevance, I gave it 7 out of 10. I think it's pretty relevant. It's part of the lineup here again. But also, just having a space game, like in the launch lineup of the Atari 2600, and also having it be a game that came out on arcades 2 months ago, it's like, whoa, can this actually be done? Like, can we just take current arcade machine games and put them on this console? Like
Right.
we're
Yeah.
gonna find out.
That's whole new territory.
This is like one of the games that starts it, I think. So definitely relevant. And then overall, I gave it 2.75 out of 10. I think it's decently fun. Like I said, the main thing for me is like it just makes me feel like I'm in space in Star Wars, and for this to come out when it did, that's a huge marketing sell for me. So that's what's gonna keep me coming back because I want to hear the droids talk again and shoot off some lasers. So yeah,
Right.
and that'll do it for Starship, Wes. What do you think?
Nice.
Not like too badly diminished from the arcade version, I don't think.
No, which is crazy. I mean, all the other ones we've kind of had some distance from the arcade game from when we reviewed it to be like, okay, that's aged a bit. It doesn't
Yeah.
look as perfect as it did. We aren't as excited as when it came out. But to be like an okay version of something we just saw and we were like, oh, that's sick to the arcade
Right.
version, that's not bad. I mean, even if it's like just okay, all these cartridges, we have to keep reminding ourselves like it's a cartridge. Like, even
Right.
if it was expensive at the time, like it played all 9 of these cartridges plus more.
Yeah. I just wish the variations were a little bit better. Like from compared to the other games we've done, all those variations for the other games were so good.
Yeah, it does sound like it wasn't as full, I guess.
Yeah. And Lunar Lander is just a really weird game.
Yeah.
Not really sure what it has to do other than being in space with the other ones.
I guess that's the main tie-in.
But yeah. And then we've got 2 more honorable mentions here before we wrap up today. You want to go for surround here, Wes?
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up the last of the 9 release titles for the Atari 2600, we have Surround, which is also called Chase for the Sears version. It's basically Snake, except there's kind of modes where you can play using diagonals, you can wrap around the screen, you can speed up, or you can choose to not leave a trail behind you when pressing down a button, and it's 1 or 2 player.
What do you think about that, Wes? Choosing not to leave a trail is quite weird to me. It's like that's the whole point of Snake.
Yeah, I don't know what you would do if you didn't leave a trail. I mean, it reminds me of that in Maze on Fairchild where you could choose not to leave a trail behind you to like find your way back, but I guess here you could like leave escape routes for yourself so you don't
Right.
run into your own tail. It's interesting, but
Yeah, maybe you couldn't hold it down like that long. Maybe only a couple mines at a time or something. So
right.
you always
'Cause
had to be laying down something. Otherwise, it
because
would just
if everyone held it down the whole game, it wouldn't make any sense.
right.
So hopefully, but we don't really know.
Unless if you held it down the whole time, but then you let it go when you're right in front of your opponent. I don't know. There might
That's
be
true.
something there.
Yeah.
But that leaves us for the last one for the Atari 2600 lineup. It's of course Pong, but they called it Video Olympics. But it's more than just Pong, obviously. Like, the Atari 2600 is no simple console. We have just normal Pong, 1 to 4 player, and versus AI, but then you have all these other modes. You have handball, soccer, hockey. We've all seen that. It's not a big deal. But then we have foosball, which is kind of a weird one. We have seen it on some other consoles. And then we have Quadrapong, which is actually like, I think it's one of my top rated games in like 73 or something like that. I actually love Quadrapong. It's kind of like the Pong version, but it's 4 player and each player is guarding one edge of the screen, top, bottom, left, and right. I just love that one. And then it also has volleyball and basketball, and both of those use gravity, just like the original volleyball by Atari did. And the basketball one is pretty cool too because you have to kind of like, I think it does maybe like 2 small bounces and then a big bounce. So you have to like make sure that big bounce is aimed so it's going up towards the basket. So that's quite a lot of different Pong variations. Enough that it would be like, again, if it was just a single console by itself with just Pong, be like, okay, that's like a decent amount for that one console, but no, it's just
Right.
one cartridge. It's crazy. And obviously, all these games had tons of different color variations for every single version, so pretty cool. And that'll do it for us today. I know it's been a bit of a longer one, but this is one of the times that's okay. This is a big console and a big episode for us. So thank you for sticking in there and sticking with us through 51 episodes.
Absolutely. And make sure to check out our website as we're always updating it Follow us on Twitter so you can get updates if we have to cancel an episode or hear when we're posting our episodes next. And also send us an email if you have any questions.
Yep. And with that, we will see you guys in the next one.
See you all next time.